Namaste, and welcome to our continuing series on Savitri with our beloved Ranga. We are in Canto 3 of Book 1, The Yoga of the Soul's Release, page 31. Beginning with the line, "There were high encounters." There were high encounters, epic colloquies, and counsels came couched in celestial speech, and honeyed pleadings breathed from occult lips, to help the heart to yield to rapture's call, and sweet temptations stole from beauty's realms, and sudden ecstasies from a world of bliss. It was a region of wonder and delight. All now his bright clairaudience could receive. A contact thrilled of mighty unknown things. Awakened to new unearthly closenesses, the touch replied to subtle infinities, and with a silver cry of opening gates, sight's lightnings leaped into the invisible. Ever his consciousness and vision grew. They took an ampler sweep, a loftier flight. He passed the border marked for matter's rule, and passed the zone where thought replaces life. Out of this world of signs, suddenly he came into a silent self where world was not, and looked beyond into a nameless vast. These symbol figures lost their right to live. All tokens dropped our sense can recognize. There the heart beat no more at body's touch. There the eyes gazed no more on beauty's shape.
So, there were high encounters, epic colloquies. Now, every word that Sri Aurobindo uses, his actual experience. This is all we are now reading from the last 2 weeks. Sri Aurobindo's experiences after he reached the silent mind. Many of these words here are reminiscent of the silent mind, the spiritual planes of consciousness, where you are in a cosmic consciousness as well as in a place where you see the physical world as unreal. Sometimes it can be both. So, we'll identify the words and you will see that basically. Remember also that the two basic experiences in spiritual life are when your consciousness goes up to the spiritual planes and experiences the vacant infinite, the Brahman consciousness, which is infinite, eternal, featureless, and absolutely static. And you see the physical world as unreal. That's 90% that happens. Or if you go into your intraconscient at the heart level, from the solar plexus inside, you have intimacy and love for the divine. So these are the two basic. So the one that he is going to describe is very, very fundamental. Most of the yogis have that experience of going up and experiencing the Brahman consciousness. And it is, remember, all the names we'll identify, it is featurelessness and immutability. That are the two main features. Eternal, infinite, that also is there. There is no limits, and also you know that you have always existed and that you will always exist. Okay, so
I want to add one thing today.
Yeah.
And that was A.E.'s comment criticizing Sri Aurobindo for using too many superlative words.
Yes.
And Sri
And he
Aurobindo's
answered.
reply was, "I only write what I have seen or felt."
Yeah. And what can I do if I have seen that?
Exactly.
That's what he wrote. So, there were high encounters, epic colloquies. Now, this epic colloquies, he is referring to very clearly what he wrote in the Conversations of the Dead. Epic colloquy. Remember, he is going there and experiencing these. There is a whole book on that, Conversations of the Dead. There is a discussion between Deen Shah and Perizad. They must be from Iran. Okay. Turiu and Uriu. Mazzini, Cavour and Garibaldi from Italy. Shivaji and Jai Singh. Littleton and Percival. So these is what he is. Colloquies means conversations. And that's the title of the book, Conversations of the Dead. He has participated in these. And epic colloquies. So it's not just an empty word. His actual experience. He's all through. You will see that he's referring constantly to his experiences. So, and also high encounters. Now, I don't have any example of high encounter, but the next I have. The next one is, and counsels came couched in celestial speech. Note the alliteration. Counsels came couched in celestial speech. And this counsel, I'll give you two examples of the advice that he got. One was from Vivekananda. It was in the subtle world. Vivekananda had passed away. He came in his subtle body and gave him all the information that he needed for the supermind. Number one, he spoke to him in one place he says for 1 month, and in another place he says for about 2-3 weeks. So it's not very accurate, but he had this. So theoretically, he knew what the supermind was. Theoretically. But after 1926, when he had the overmind descent of Sri Krishna into his body, now he knew that this is the overmind and not the supermind. So then that time he gave up all activity and withdrew, wanting to bring down the supermind. So the second is Ramakrishna came to him. Ramakrishna came to him and told him, in Bengali, he heard the word Mandir Godo. That means build a temple. So Sri Aurobindo thought at that time that he meant a physical temple. And because they were very much in the freedom movement. And they wanted to train spiritually and militarily. He was very actively pursuing this.
Especially the young people.
Yes. And they had started also. They infiltrated the Baroda army with one person to learn the techniques of warfare. But then finally it didn't happen. So first he thought that he is being advised, Mandir got to build a temple. He thought that he meant this. But later on he found out that he didn't mean that. He meant build the temple in yourself. So these are the counsels came couched in celestial speech.
Alliteration.
Yeah. Oof. Alliteration. And honeyed pleadings breathed from occult lips. And what are these pleadings? To help the heart to yield to rapture's call. So, mother is constantly receiving calls on her for help. And when she used to give blessings, those days in the early 50s and even in the late 50s, she used to give blessings in the meditation hall. She used to often go into trance. Her head used to, and she told us afterwards that she was responding to calls made on her. People are calling her. So, this is what he's saying. Honeyed pleadings breathed from occult lips to help the heart to yield to rapture's call. And sweet temptations stole from beauty's realms and sudden ecstasies from a world of bliss. All this is experiencing. It was you have got region and I have got rain. Now this is also interesting, nothing to do with Savitri, but I am telling you it's a very interesting thing. How the people who read those manuscripts, they read one thing, and now in the archives they have read another thing. Now they have read region, okay? And earlier it was rain, R-E-I-G-N. Now note the resemblance of the two words, and you will see that both words fit the meaning. It's very interesting. The reign of wonder and delight, it does make sense. A region of wonder and delight also makes sense. So, this is very often it is like that. Okay, I'll give you many examples like that in Life Divine and also in Synthesis. Yeah.
34 questions to the fellow who is doing Savitri now. And because I saw in Savitri sometimes mothers capitalized, sometimes not capitalized.
Yeah.
So questions like that. 3 years later, he comes to me and he says, I have all your answers. And he shows me all those pages where Sri Aurobindo made changes. He satisfied every question at that time.
Yeah.
I still have problems.
Yeah.
This was a seed cast into endless space versus thus was a seed cast. They both can work,
Yeah.
as you say.
I had a discussion also with Richard once in the archives. I used to work in the archives.
Yeah.
So I said that yes, you are doing what you think is the best, that's fine. But isn't there an element of subjective judgment?
Yes.
And he had to admit that yes, after all, it is ultimately a subjective judgment.
But the reading of Sri Aurobindo's handwriting was not easy.
Oh, wow. Towards the end, very difficult. Like that. Prithvi Singh was very good in the earlier days. He could read some of those.
Yes.
And Niruddha is complaining once to Sri Aurobindo, your handwriting I am not being able to read. So tell me what. Sri Aurobindo replies very humorously that I write for you, it's for you to decipher. Okay, let's get back to our Savitri.
Yes.
And sweet temptations stole from beauty's realms, and sudden ecstasies from a world of bliss. It was a region of wonder and delight. All now his bright clairaudience could receive. Now we have seen recently also that clairaudience and clairvoyance come from the intraconscient.
Yes.
But they can also come from the higher planes of consciousness. Okay, so a contact thrilled of mighty unknown things. A contact thrilled of mighty unknown things. Okay? Unknown for the physical world. But when you go there, things which you can't even dream of here, you come in contact with all those things. Awakened to new unearthly closenesses. Now the word unearthly is to be interpreted in a positive way and not a negative way. So unearthly means not of the earth in that sense. But unearthly means it can also be used pejoratively a little bit sometimes, but not always. So unearthly closeness. Now, the touch replied to subtle infinities. Now this he is talking, when you go there to the higher planes of consciousness, you have subtle senses. And all the next few lines are all the subtle senses that he is experiencing. Now the touch also can be subtle. You can have subtle sight, you can have subtle hearing. Okay? I have a poem of Sri Aurobindo, subtle hearing. I think we read the other day, na? So, now subtle sight also is there and subtle touch. So what is meant by subtle touch? Okay? I'll tell you what he meant. Okay? He said, he wrote a poem. Yeah, here it is. This poem was written in the jail. He conceived it in the jail and he wrote it later on maybe, or he got some, he wrote it in jail. It was an experience where he is in jail. Now, what can be the worst possible conditions in a jail? Rotten food, no freedom, no, not even allowed to speak to others, and in a small room you are locked up. So this is the poem that it came to him in the jail. Okay, so here there is reference to that touch. That's why I'm coming. So, invitation. With wind and the weather beating round me, up to the hill and the moorland I go. Who will come with me? Who will climb with me? Wade through the brook and tramp through the snow? Not in the petty circle of cities, cramped by your doors and your walls I dwell. Over me, God is blue in the welkin. Against me, the wind and the storm rebel. Okay? I sport with solitude here in my regions of misadventure have made me a friend. Who would live largely? Who would live freely? Here to the wind-swept uplands ascend. I am the lord of tempest and mountain. I am the spirit of freedom and pride. Stark must he be, and a kinsman to danger, who shares my kingdom and walks at my side. Now, afterwards he explained that he was really this wind and the weather beating round me. He was actually feeling the wind and the weather beating around me subtly. So that's why I mentioned it. It was not just imagination. It was a real experience in subtle world. So touch. He is now talking of touch. Okay. Then later on there is sight also. The touch replied to subtle infinities, and with a silver cry of opening gates, sight's lightnings leaped into the invisible. Here also note the alliteration. Sight's lightnings leaped into the invisible. So this is also subtle sight. He is saying things that we don't see on earth. Okay. Ever his consciousness and vision grew. They took an ampler sweep, a loftier flight. Okay. Even here there is an alliteration, but it is ampler, pl and fl. And fl, yeah. So there is a sound repetition. He passed the border, marked for matters rule. Now, marked for matter, again matters and marked for matters rule, alliteration everywhere. But matters rule ends at the mental level. Above the mental level is the region of the spiritual worlds. So that's he passed. That's what he's saying. Okay? He is not in the physical world anymore. He passed the border marked for matter's rule and passed a zone where thought replaces life. He has gone into these worlds where there is no more all these things. Out of this world of science, suddenly he came into a silent self where world was not. So, world of science, the world of science is our physical world. Because science features, characteristics, there in the Brahmic consciousness, it is free of all signs and immutable, featureless. So, when he is out of this world of science, suddenly he came into a silent self where world was not. Okay? Again, where world was not. Again, the W sound being repeated. So, very clearly now he has gone into the Brahmic consciousness and looked beyond into a nameless vast. So, again, nameless. There is no description possible for all these things. So, very clearly, these are all, he is telling you that he is in the Brahmic consciousness. A silent mind and featurelessness everywhere. These symbol figures lost their right to live. So, the symbol figures are the forms in the physical world. And they have no right to live. In other words, the world has become an illusion. That's what it means. The symbol figures lost their right to live. All tokens dropped our sense. All tokens dropped, our sense can recognize. So, this sentence, he has inverted the verb. Yes. Our sense can recognize all and drop them. Okay? Dropped, the tokens are dropped. And what are tokens? Tokens are again type of symbols. Because a token is just a piece of paper or a piece of plastic or whatever. It allows you something. It allows you to do something. So that is the reality behind. So token would mean, normally it means a mark, a sign, a feature. An object which used instead of money. That's a token. So all tokens were dropped. In other words, the world is not existing anymore for him. That's what he means. So very clearly, there the heart beat no more at body's touch. So the physical functionings are not there in the higher world. That's what he means. There the eyes gaze no more on beauty shape. What he means is that the physical eyes are not operating there. Sight, he has told you out earlier, sight. Okay? So, yeah. Sight's lightnings leaped into the invisible. So when he's talking of this, he's saying, there the eyes gaze no more on beauty shape, not the physical eyes. That's what he means.
In rare and lucent intervals of hush, into a signless region he could soar, packed with the deep contents of formlessness, where world was into a single being wrapped, and all was known by the light of identity, and spirit was its own self-evidence. The Supreme's gaze looked out through human eyes and saw all things and creatures as itself, and knew all thought and word as its own voice. There, unity is too close for search and clasp, and love is a yearning of the one for the one, and beauty is a sweet difference of the same, and oneness is the soul of multitude. There all truths unite in a single truth, and all ideas rejoin reality. Go up to there.
Okay. So again, all the description is very clearly the oneness. You are experiencing the oneness. Okay, so let's look at what he's saying. In rare and lucent intervals of hush. So hush is silence, okay? And rare and lucent intervals of hush, into a signless region he could soar. Again, signless means featureless, okay? So no description possible. Signless, token, symbol, all the nameless, all these suggest very clearly the experience of the Brahman consciousness. Into a signless region he could soar, packed with the deep contents of formlessness. There you are again, no form. So featurelessness again. All these words are suggesting the Brahmic consciousness, where world was into a single being wrapped. Okay, so into a single being wrapped. In other words, he is seeing a being where the whole world is in him. That's a cosmic consciousness. So, and all was known by the light of identity. You have identified yourself with everything, and you are in everything, and everything is in you. That's what is meaning, okay? And spirit was its own self-evidence. This sentence means that the consciousness can never be known by mind. Consciousness knows itself only. So you have to get rid of your mind and experience the consciousness through consciousness. That's what is meaning. Spirit was its own self-evidence. Spirit can never be known by the mind. So its own self-evidence. You have to become the spirit to know the spirit. Okay, so the Supreme's gaze looked out through human eyes. In other words, the divine has now seeing through your eyes. Whatever you are seeing is the divine sight. and saw all things and creatures as itself. There again, cosmic consciousness. I am seeing others, but I am seeing myself with another face. That famous poem again of Surendra is there. To whichever face I turn, I see myself with another face. So identification with everybody, cosmic consciousness. And knew all thought and word as its own voice. Again, the cosmic consciousness. There, unity is too close for search and clasp. Everything is one. So, there is no question of searching. When everything is one, where is the question of search? Or clasp. You can clasp something which is finite, which is a form, but there you can't. So, there, unity is too close for search and clasp, and love is a yearning of the one for the one. So, this is something very interesting. They say that to have a relation with the divine, there must necessarily be two, you and the divine. In other words, unity is not possible. But here he is saying that unity is possible. So he has said that also elsewhere, that love is possible even when there is oneness. So, how interestingly he has put it. And love is a yearning of the one for the one. And beauty is a sweet difference of the same. The same thing is repeating in different words. And beauty is the sweet difference of the same.
With the S cap.
Yes. The same is the one that is there, the one. Okay. And oneness is the soul of multitude. You see the differences, you see the forms, and yet you see the many. You see the many, but you see the one behind the forms. Very obviously the cosmic consciousness. We read further.
There all the truths unite in a single truth, and all ideas rejoin reality. There, knowing herself by her own termless self, wisdom supernal, wordless, absolute, sat uncompanioned in the eternal calm, all-seeing, motionless, sovereign, and alone. There, knowledge needs not words to embody idea. Idea, seeking a house in boundlessness, weary of its homeless immortality, asks not in thought's carved brilliant cell to rest, whose single window's clipped outlook on things sees only a little arc of God's vast sky. The boundless with the boundless there consorts. While there, one can be wider than the world. While there, one is one's own infinity. Okay.
Again, the same thing, the experience in same thing is repeating in different words. Okay. There, knowledge needs not words to embody idea. So, it is beyond language and beyond speech. It reminds you of the Upanishadic statement. Yato vacho nivartante aprapya manasasa. The region you go into, you go there and mind cannot grasp the reality. It returns baffled because it does not understand. It is something beyond language. Speech, not possible there. No speech. There, and again the alliteration. Knowledge needs not words to embody idea. Idea seeking a house in boundlessness. There is the idea is seeking a house in boundlessness. It's an interesting. In boundlessness, there is no house, but the mind is always trying to seek something concrete. Okay, that's what you see. weary of its homeless immortality. The homeless immortality, it wants something more concrete. Okay, so that's what he's saying. And weary asks not in thought's carved brilliant cell to rest. Although it is wanting something more concrete, it is not wanting to rest in thought's brilliant cell. Cell is a limited thing, and thought is limiting everything. It is analytical, it is not synthetic. And therefore, but he is saying it is brilliant self.
And it's carved.
Yeah.
It's a fixed thing.
Yeah.
Carved.
Carved brilliant self to rest. It is not wanting to rest. Whose single window, clipped outlook on things, sees only a little arc of God's vast sky. The arc repeats the carved. Okay, so that's the thing. Now there's a whole image here. Okay, house, homeless, cell, window.
Mm-hmm.
So a little arc, So it is trying to find something more concrete than the formlessness. And yet it is not, because when it sees that, when you see form, you are seeing only a little arc of God's vast sky. But when you want to see God's sky, it is formless. It's not a little arc anymore. Okay? So, the boundless with the boundless, their consorts. So, the boundless with the boundless. Relation. Consorts means come into a relationship. So, that's what it means. The boundless with the boundless, their consorts, while there one can be wider than the world. Okay? In other words, again, you can be wider than the world means the world is contained in you. So that's again the same thing. While there, one is one's own identity. Infinity.
Infinity.
One is one's own infinity. So again, one is one's own infinity means identity. So again, you have become the vast, you have become the cosmic consciousness. All these suggest again the cosmic consciousness. The oneness and even if you see the multiplicity, you see the oneness behind all forms.
His center was no more in earthly mind. A power of seeing silence filled his limbs. Caught by a voiceless white epiphany, into a vision that surpasses forms, into a living that surpasses life, he neared the still consciousness sustaining all. The voice that only by speech can move the mind became a silent knowledge in the soul. The strength that only in action feels its truth was lodged now in a mute, omnipotent peace.
His center was no more in earthly mind. In earthly mind, the center is the ego. So, there his center is the self and the psychic being. It's not the ego anymore. That's what it means. It's not in earthly mind. Okay. A power of seeing silence filled his limbs. A power of seeing silence. He is describing the seeing silence, we could say the silent witness. We are seeing, but silent. In other words, we are not making any judgment. So this is again the example of the Brahmic consciousness. You are seeing everything clearly without judgment. It is silent. It is not judging. Okay. So, a power of seeing silence filled his limbs, caught by a voiceless white epiphany. Okay. The word epiphany means sudden revelation of God, and it is in Christianity, Christ appearing to the three wise men. Okay. Or a sudden revelation or an inspiration. This is what epiphany means. So, caught by a voiceless white epiphany, suddenly a revelation of something or other, into a vision that surpasses forms. Again, you are again surpassing forms. Constantly the repetition of the experience in different words. Okay, so into a living that surpasses life. No movement. Life is movement. So again, he is telling you the featurelessness and the immutability. In different words, life is necessarily action and movement. So when it is surpassing life, it is immutable. So in a very strange way he is putting, but he is describing the Brahmic consciousness. Immutability and formlessness and featurelessness. He neared the still consciousness sustaining all. So this is very clearly explained in the Life Divine, that it is the silence that allows the movement. If the silence is not there, there can be no movement. He has explained this. It's again, you can explain this by the image of the water behind the dam. The water is silent, but if the water is not there, there cannot be any flow down the. So the silence is the water being let behind, from the dam, and the silence is allowing the movement. So that's what he means here, sustaining all. It is the featurelessness that sustains all features. The silence that sustains all the movement. It is spirit that sustains the material world. He neared the still consciousness sustaining all. The voice that only by speech can move the mind became a silent knowledge in the soul. So, speech disappeared and became a silent knowledge. A knowledge beyond words. Okay? The strength that only in action feels its truth was lodged now in a mute, omnipotent peace. So, strength is there, but it is omnipotent peace. It is peace. It's not acting, but it is full, it's a concentrated power. In the Brahmic consciousness, there is no movement, but that doesn't mean to say that there is no power. Power is there held back. Just like the water behind the dam again. That will explain the. So that's what he's saying. The strength that only in action feels its truth was lodged now in a mute, omnipotent peace. Mute again, the word silence, and peace also suggests a mute, and peace both suggest no movement. A leisure in the
labor of the worlds, a pause in the joy and anguish of the search, restored the stress of nature to God's calm. A vast unanimity ended life's debate. The war of thoughts that fathers the universe, the clash of forces struggling to prevail, in the tremendous shock that lights a star, as in the building of a grain of dust, the grooves that turn their dumb ellipse in space, plowed by the seeking of the world's desire, the long regurgitations of time's flood, the torment edging the dire force of lust that wakes kinetic in earth's dullard slime and carves a personality out of mud, the sorrow by which nature's hunger is fed, the estrus which creates with fire of pain, the fate that punishes virtue with defeat, the tragedy that destroys long happiness, the weeping of love, the quarrel of the gods, ceased in a truth that lives in its own light.
So, the non-movement he is describing, all the things that are there in the physical world ceased. All these things they cease. in the word, in a truth which lives in its own light. So the key word there is seized. All these things that he is talking about did not occur there in the physical world. A leisure in the labor of the worlds. Again, labor of the world is the movement in the physical world, and leisure, no movement. So, again, in different words, he is explaining this is poetry, it's not philosophy, but he is using so many different words to explain the same thing. A leisure, no movement, okay, in the labor of the worlds. In other words, you are in the physical world and your body is moving, you are having thoughts, you are speaking, but you are absolutely in the silent consciousness. Your consciousness is absolutely silent. So that's what he's saying. Okay? A pause in the joy and anguish of the search restored the stress of nature to God's calm. A pause in the joy and anguish of the search. Okay? When you are searching, there is a joy, but there is also an anguish. There is an expectation, and when you don't find, there is an anguish. So, a vast unanimity ended life's debate. Okay, life's debate. Debate is when there are two. There is a difference. So there is a multiplicity. Debate can't be with one. There are two. So all the contraries, the dualities of life, all the dualities of life, he is putting it in this way, life's debate. There is a debate between good and evil, between silence and movement. There is a debate between kindness and cruelty, everything. So that's the dualities in the physical world is putting in this way. Debate, how interesting. It's just, he is describing the dualities. Okay?
And the war of thoughts.
Yeah, the war of thoughts that fathers the universe. There's a whole article by Sri Aurobindo on Heraclitus. And that's what he's saying. Heraclitus says, war is the father of the worlds. And he is repeating that here. And what he meant was that through a clash, okay, there's a growth. And that's what happens when two ideas face each other. There's a compromise, and then you can climb to the next level. You can climb to the next level. That's what he meant. And he also said that fire is the last. Ether, air, fire, water, earth. Heraclitus says that fire is the final principle that builds the worlds. So here he is repeating that. The war of thoughts that fathers the universe, that builds the universe. Okay, so the clash of forces, again the same thing. Debate. He is using the word debate, and now he's saying clash of forces. Again the same thing in different words. Struggling to prevail in the tremendous shock that lights a star. Look at that line. Fantastic. In the tremendous shock that lights a star, as in the building of a grain of dust. So, again in Life Divine, he has the same idea. Okay? The force that is building the vastness of space is also spending its all energy to do the smallest thing. In Life Divine, he mentions the force of the divine spends as much energy on the solar system as in the anthill, the making of an anthill. And there is that in the poem, he has that line, the hand that spent Jupiter spinning through heaven spends all its spends all its energy to fashion a curl. So, again the same thing, that the energy is the same everywhere. Unanimity, he is talking of the oneness everywhere. So, energy is the same everywhere, whether it is building a solar system or even doing this. Okay, so same idea. In the tremendous shock that lights a star, as in the building of a grain of dust, the grooves that turn their dumb ellipse in space. Now he is being almost the ellipse is not a circle, it's an elongated circle. Okay? What you call an oval, na? So, and that's the movement of the heavenly bodies around the sun. They are ellipses, they are not absolutely circular. Even the comets that come every 75 years or 100 years, they describe an ellipse. So, see, and grooves. In other words, the fixity. A groove suggests a fixity and a limitation. So now all the lines that follow, he is saying that these things exist in the physical world, but they all ceased when in the higher level of consciousness. So now all these lines, we would say, and finally he'll give you, they all ceased. Okay? So, what ceased? The grooves. Actually, one by one we can take up. I have made a note. The first is the war of thoughts, number one. They ceased up there. There is no war of thoughts. There is total harmony. Two, the clash of forces. There is no clash of forces in the higher worlds. In the tremendous shock that lights a star, as in the building of a grain of dust. Okay? The grooves that turn their dumb ellipse in space, the grooves also, there is no limitation there. That's what he means. Okay? Then you go to the next. The long regurgitations in time's flood. Now the word regurgitation is a fantastic, it is very onomatopoeic. Yeah, okay, so it means gushing back again. Okay? Gushing back again, or to pour back, yeah, cast out again. To bring back food into the, that's what the cow does. It takes the straw into its stomach, brings it up, and again starts chewing it. So that's a regurgitation. In time's flood, okay? See, repetition of things. Regurgitation is suggestive of a repetition of things. Like, as they say, history repeats itself. So, this is what he's saying in different. But all these things did not exist there. Finally, he comes to the ceased. So, all these things ceased there. The long regurgitations of time's flood, the torment edging the dire force of lust. Okay? All these are things which exist in the physical world. They don't exist there. So, the fourth one is the long regurgitations. The torment edging the dire force of lust is the fifth one. That wakes kinetic in earth's dullard slime. Okay? That also is not there. And carves a personality out of mud. Okay? So, that's force that does the work here. The sorrow by which nature's hunger is fed. This is the sixth one. I think the word
estrus.
It's pronounced estrus. I thought it was pronounced estrus. Okay. So, you see, it has many meanings. It has got the sexual heat in female animals, or a good impulse on a gadfly. It can also mean a gadfly, that which pushes you. Okay. So, which creates with fire of pain. That's again the seventh one. The fate that punishes virtue with defeat. Okay, that's the eighth one. All these things don't exist there in the physical world, in the higher world. The tragedy that destroys long happiness, the weeping of love, the quarrel of the gods, seized in a truth which lives in its own light. So all these things which exist in the physical world, clash, war, weeping, love, regurgitation, grooves, limitation, all these things did not exist there. Ceased. So we have got about 7 or 8 subjects and one verb for it.
Yes.
So that's what it.
Good.
We can stop.
All right. Namaste.